So welcome students, parents, guardians, a warm welcome to our college financial aid program for the evening. We have a great presentation ahead of us this evening. We're thrilled to have you here tonight as we embark on this important journey together in person. We're also live streaming via our live stream YouTube channel. And I'm April Umich. I'm the administrator for school counseling, K through 12 here in the district. And tonight we're all here gathered with the same goal, and it's navigating that complex world of financial aid within the college process. Our presentation is going to last about an hour, and additionally there will be a video recording of tonight's presentation that will be posted on the district's news YouTube channel shortly thereafter. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Superintendent Tona, the Board of Education, and Dr. Lawrence for giving us this opportunity to meet tonight so we can support our students and families. Additionally, I'd like to thank our MHS School Counseling Department for all their hard work and support on behalf of our students. Choosing to pursue higher education is a significant decision that comes with many, many responsibilities. And we understand that navigating the financial aid aspects of college can be daunting to say the least. But that's why we're here tonight, to provide you with valuable insight and information to help you make informed decisions about funding your college education. Over the next hour, we will explore the various avenues of financial aid, scholarships, grants, and the free application for federal student aid, FAFSA. Our goal is to demystify the process and empower you with the knowledge and resources that you need to make college more affordable. And we understand that every family situation is unique, and our hope is that you leave here tonight with a clearer understanding of the opportunities available to you. And tonight, we are honored to have an expert here with us in the field of financial aid, Mr. Dan Robinson, as our guest speaker for this evening's presentation. Mr. Robinson is a financial aid professional with over 35 years of experience in student aid field. He is currently the campus director of financial aid at Pace University's Pleasantville campus, where he has been for the last 20+ years. Prior to Pace, Mr. Robinson worked at Adelphi University and Iona College. After Mr. Robinson's presentation concludes, we're going to open up the forum for questions in our audience that you may have. But without any further ado, I'd like to dive into this with Mr. Robinson, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. So get started here. Every time I hear 35 years in the industry, I'm like, how can that be? I don't feel like I'm 35 years old yet, but again, as we all know, we age much too fast. So we're going to talk about a lot of different topics tonight in a short period of time. So some of them I may breeze over a little more than others. But as you can see, there's a host of things we'll be discussing, focusing mainly on the financial aid process and the forms needed, and a little bit about the tail end when everything is done. So the first term you're going to hear a lot of times when your child's looking for college is the cost of attendance. What is it going to cost you as a family to pay for that? So the first two items, four items, I guess technically, are the most important things to look for. Those are the direct expenses and what the school is going to bill you for. It's the tuition, the standard fees, housing, and food, the meal plan. So the bill from each school, that's what they're going to say is what you owe each semester before any financial aid kicks in. But when they're building a cost of attendance overall, it also includes indirect expenses. These are costs you should expect to incur while your child's at college. The books and supplies, getting them to and from school, whether it's a couple times a year if they're going away, or every day if they're going locally. And then miscellaneous and personal expenses. You still have to buy the clothes and the toiletries, and etc. So all those things tie into what is overall the cost of attendance when you look at the school. But you really want to focus on the first two items listed, the tuition fees, housing, and food, which used to be called room and board back in the day, but the new official term is housing and food. So what schools use to help determine how much need you have to help pay for these expenses is something called the Student Aid Index. Now, quick survey, how many people in the room have been through the financial aid process before? Okay, so you probably heard the term expected family contribution. That term has gone away, and it's going to be the SAI, Student Aid Index, which is finally, that term was hated term, expected family contribution. The Student Aid Index is a much better term for us. Basically, it's a number determined by the federal government based on your family's financial picture. It looks at the student's financial contribution as well as the parent contribution. And it's a static number. So regardless of the school your child attends, it's going to stay the same. Schools use it to determine financial need, which is a simple math problem. Cost of attendance minus SAI equals financial need. And the cost of attendance is made up of both the indirect and direct components. So as I said, it's a static number, regardless of the school your child looks to attend, whether it's a local community college, state school, private school, that SAI will remain the same, but the need will change just because of the cost of the school itself. So, what type of financial aid is out there? There's 4 pieces to the pie. The ones on the right, where you really want to hopefully get the most of, that's the gift aid or free money, and the left-hand side is self-help aid. So we talk about scholarships. When a student applies to a school, their admissions application usually serves as a merit-based scholarship application as well. They use your high school information, your grade point average, if you took test scores, if they're not test optional, and possibly some other high school experience to determine what type of merit-based scholarship they can award you. Now, if your schools you're applying to are test optional, find out from the school, ask them the question, at what point should I not submit test scores? I can speak from experience where we have some students, if they submit test scores, we have to count them. And they may have had a 96 high school average, but only like a 1050 SAT. It actually brought down their merit scholarship because they applied straight as the 96 without the test scores, they might have got an extra $1,000 or $1,500 in their scholarship. So check with your schools. Some schools are also test blind. I went through the process last year. My daughter's currently a college freshman, and one of the schools she applied to, they said, even if you took test scores, do not submit them, we don't want them. And my daughter was thrilled to hear that because her tests were not all that good, but not a good test taker. But one of the schools she applied to required test scores, all the others were test optional. So again, other scholarships besides merit are talent-based, which usually means you have to have something extra beyond the classroom, whether it's an artistic talent, you're doing drawing, painting, whatever it might be, music or theater-based talent, athletic talent, which usually means there's something else the student's going to have to do to get that award, whether it's submitting a portfolio, being recruited by a coach, going through an audition to get the extra funding that could be available. And again, that's something that is considered scholarship money also. When we speak to grants, what we're really looking at is need-based money. This is outside of anything academic, using that formula and possibly some other formulas schools come up with. Can they give you anything based on need called a grant? Again, free money, gift aid, does not have to be paid back. So those are the 2 main items you're looking for. Now, as far as self-help aid goes, work study is considered self-help aid because, kind of skipping to the next slide in a way here, it's money from the federal government that helps pay for your child to work on campus. So most colleges and universities have students working and paying them usually minimum wage. It's a benefit to the school because we're getting, I'd say we're getting cheap labor because we're only paying 25 cents on the dollar. The rest of that money is coming from government funds, and that's why it's considered financial aid. It has to be part of this. Some students will work not through a work-study program, and that's completely different. That's completely on the school, and that's not considered financial aid. And I'm going to get into the loan section in a moment. So, 5 main sources of financial aid, as you can see here. Federal government being the largest. These are the 6 main programs that the federal government does have to offer. The federal Pell Grant is directly tied to your FAFSA, which I'll get into in a moment, the free application for federal student aid. It determines based on the family's financial income if the student's eligible for the Pell Grant. The minimum award next year is scheduled to be, I think, $795, and the maximum award $7,950. It's not finalized yet, but that's what we're being told. It's a sliding scale, depending on many different factors within the family household from the FAFSA, and it's not something you can appeal to a school for because we have no say in who gets the Pell Grant. The Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, it's a lot to say, commonly known as SEOG, is a pot of money schools receive from the government to award to Pell recipients only. So if your child's not eligible for Pell, there's no way they'll be able to get SEOG. Schools determine who is eligible of their Pell recipients for these funds using different criteria, mainly being that they have high financial need and they meet certain filing deadlines. Those are usually the two main priority items for SEOG, but each school differs a little bit of money. But again, it's only for Pell recipients. Now the teacher education assistance in college, Teach Grant, keep it nice and simple, is very unique. This is a program that schools opt into. Not all schools participate. It's for students looking to become educators, have to be a major in education, and upon graduating, have to teach in a designated teaching shortage areas as determined by the Department of Education. So what those schools are now could be completely different 5 or 6 years down the line. And if students do not meet all that criteria, it gets paid back as an unsubsidized loan. So the money would have to be returned to the government. So a lot of schools are hesitant to participate in this program because they see students come in as education majors, and by the time they're sophomores and juniors, they change their majors. More, from what I've seen over my years, we've had more students change into education than what coming into education, much more leaving as well. So it's kind of a mix. And a lot of students come back then and get their teaching degree on the graduate level as opposed to undergraduate. And there's no grant on the graduate level for the Teach Grant. It's strictly for undergraduate. I touched on federal work study. Now, the student loans. First-year students are eligible for up to $5,500 in the federal direct student loan program. It's divided up into two types of loans, subsidized and unsubsidized. The subsidized loan is need-based. So after all of the gift aid is awarded, if there's still room in the budget, the student can receive up to $3,500 in the subsidized loan, meaning while the student's in school and in a 6-month grace period, if the loan is interest-free. So figure it's an interest-free loan for a minimum of 4.5 years before any interest starts accruing and the student has to pay anything back. So if you're going to go the loan route and the child has the subsidized loan, it's the one you definitely want to take. The unsubsidized loan, all the requirements are the same. It does not have to be paid back until 6 months after the student graduates. However, interest starts accruing as soon as that loan is dispersed. And the current interest rate is roughly 5.5% this year. It does change on a yearly basis, but what the first loan is, it's fixed at 5.5%. Next year's loan will be a different rate, so on and so forth. And students consolidate them all together at the end. So those are the loans that the students can take out. $5,500 for the first year, increases to $6,500 the second year, and the final 2 years, the maximum is $7,500. So it's not at a public school. It's very helpful. At a private school, it's a drop in the bucket. And now the Federal Direct Plus loan. Plus stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. So this is a loan that you as parents can take out through the federal government to help pay for your child's education. They advertise it as a low-interest loan for parents to help pay. Now, current interest rate's a little over 8%, and there's a 4.25% origination fee on top of that. So if you ask for $10,000, you get $9,500 and something or another. You're not getting the full $10,000. And again, 8% is not the greatest rate. What is positive about this loan, as far as credit checks go, it's a very simple credit check. They look at your recent credit history, are you paying your bills on time, and you have no major bankruptcies, defaults, etc. It does not look at your credit score, it does not look at your income, it does not look at your debt, it doesn't look if you're working. So it's good as a last resort for a lot of families. It's the most convenient loan. We've seen that in the last couple of years where parents are taking out because they don't want to look for other resources that could be available for cheaper, but that's not the best way of doing things. So the parent loan is there if needed. It has the same basic repayment terms as the unsubsidized loan. Interest accrues. You don't have to pay while your child's in school until 6 months after they finish. Now, New York State programs, I'm going to get into that in a few moments because I'll do a whole section on New York State. Now, the next source of financial aid are the schools themselves, especially when you're looking at private colleges and universities. We have a lot, merit scholarships is considered financial aid in a way, as well as the grants. So state schools may not be as generous with their funds as the private schools because, again, their cost is cheaper. Some of the higher end state schools do give scholarships, but a lot of them still do not. Some schools give out their own, in addition to scholarships, their own grants. Some schools have endowment funds, which are special funds set aside based on a donor's requirement. It usually requires meeting certain criteria, whether it's a certain major, whether you're from a certain part of the country, keeping a certain grade point average, and each school has those funds that usually handled a little separately. Most schools use information from the FAFSA or a form called the CSS profile, which I'll talk about as well. And these forms have deadlines. So you want to make sure that as you're looking for all this information, you know all the deadlines that are available from the schools. Next is the outside sources. Now, if you belong to any civic organizations, businesses, religious organizations, a lot of them have scholarship funds. Usually not a lot of money, but they could have a little bit here and there. They have their own application process. Most of the applications usually open up in the next calendar year, so January, February. But start looking now. Some of the information for the current academic year may still be posted on their websites, but you may not be able to apply for next fall yet. Good example of this, my daughter, as mentioned, she's in college now, but she played CYO basketball and volunteered for the program when she was in high school, and she got $250 from the CYO program because they had a small scholarship. They give out $1,000 a year to 4 students. So she was one of the lucky recipients. Again, a little bit of money, help pay for some books and whatnot, but again, add those up for a few different organizations, it could be very helpful. Next is your employers. You may not be aware of it, you may not know that you may not have it at all, but some employers do offer college benefits for your children, especially if you belong to a union. We're constantly filling out forms from different unions across the county, Westchester, Putnam, Rockland, etc., where parents whose children are in college can get a benefit of $1,000 a semester, $2,000 a semester because they belong to the union. And usually it requires the student maintaining a good grade point average, but again, even if you're not with a union, check with your employer to find out, do you have any sort of benefit? For the students in the room, or for your parents, for the students who may be working, ask them to check with their employer. We had a good family friend who worked with ShopRite throughout high school and continued working in college. And the last 2 years of college, they helped pay for those last 2 years. It wasn't a lot, but it did help a little bit. So again, they can't say no if you don't ask them. Now, when we get into the federal student aid process now, starting with the FAFSA and what's become available. So traditionally, the FAFSA is usually ready to file beginning October 1, however, there's a delay this year. So what federal government has done, they've put out something called the SAI estimator, where you kind of put in information that's going to be required for the FAFSA, and you can find out what your SAI is going to be and if you're going to be eligible for the federal Pell Grant. It'll take, I think it's about 17 pieces of input you have to put in, and it'll tell you immediately whether or not it'll be the SAI, and it also gives you loan eligibility and I think work study as well. It'll take you just a few minutes, but it is available now. Came live about a month and a half ago, and about after a week, it was shut down for another 2 weeks, but it has been up and running, so we're hopeful. So for those families who have never done a FAFSA before, what you need to start the whole process is something called the FSA ID. It's your username and password. For those parents who've done the FAFSA, you probably have one. If you don't remember what it is, it has a standard, you go in, you sign in, forgot name, forgot password, it'll send you the challenge questions to reset it. Both the student and the parent must have an FSA ID. The FAFSA is filed in the student's name, but has a lot of parental information. So in order to be signed, the FSA ID is now required. In the past, it wasn't. You could have done a paper application, but now it is required to complete the FAFSA. It's used not just for the FAFSA, but if you take out any of those loans, the student or the parent. It's your signature for the promissory note. And again, only the owner should create the FSA ID. I know as parents, you're probably going to have your student's ID because we're parents and that's kind of what we did. So when you get to the FAFSA webpage, everything's done on studentaid.gov. If you do FAFSA.gov, it'll still bring you to the right place. But studentaid.gov is everything federal financial aid. So this is what you'll see here. You're going to click, start the new form. The one on the left, if you had an existing form, you update it. But once this becomes available sometime in December, this is where you'll go to start the process. Now, what is the FAFSA? As you can see, the first word is free. Free application for federal student aid, which means you shouldn't have to pay anybody to help you fill it out. This year, more than ever, because of the changes that were made with the FAFSA, there's really no way paying someone's going to help you out because of the way information is going to be reported. It determines the SAI, which colleges use, and it says it's available in English and Spanish, but we're being told they're expanding that to about another 10 different languages. So hopefully that'll come to fruition. As I mentioned, it's normally filed in October, as early as October. Each school sets their own deadlines, so you want to make sure you meet that. It's not yet available, and we're waiting every day from the federal government to find out when it's going to be available. They told us December. December has 31 days. We don't know which of those 31 days it's going to be. My guess is going to be on the ball coming down from Times Square. You can file your FAFSA, blinking on there on the 31st at 11:58, 9 p.m. But once it is available, I'll be reaching out to your guidance office to make sure they're aware, to make sure they get the word out to you that it becomes available. Next year, as long as everything goes as planned, it'll be October to fill it out again. The FAFSA does need to be done every year. And as I said, each college sets their own priority dates. If you check the college website, some of them may not yet be updated because they're waiting for the actual release date. So you may want to double check. Usually we have an early priority date of November 15th. We've already moved ours out to February because we know because of the delay. So one of the reasons I mentioned that you don't need to have anyone to pay you and to help file your FAFSA is this new tool called the Direct Data Exchange, which the last thing it says allows individuals' tax information to be directly transferred from the IRS onto the FAFSA. You will not be entering your own tax information anymore. And that's what a lot of families are afraid of. I'm not an accountant, forms confuse me, I don't want to worry about messing anything up. You're not allowed to mess it up. You have to use the DDX going forward. It's no longer an option. In the past, it was an option whether or not you wanted to have the information transferred. It's no longer. So when you sign on to the FAFSA, you have to click the consent. If you don't consent, the FAFSA doesn't get processed. Again, it only populates the information that's needed to complete the FAFSA. There are a couple questions still you may need to answer from information on your tax return. It's only if you have an IRA rollover. That's really the main one. So you don't have to worry about anything else besides that. And again, eliminating manual entry eliminates mistakes. So, what information is needed from the student when they log in? It's going to ask them, if they're logging in, signed in with their FSA ID already. It's just going to kind of make sure they confirm their identity and their contact information. It gives their consent for the federal tax information, FTI's federal tax information transfer using that DDX process. It's going to ask the student's marital status, college plans, and personal or unusual circumstances. This is a new term this year. This is if the situation where a student may no longer be dependent upon their biological parents for means of being ward of the court, parents being deceased, being homeless. I doubt anyone's in the military currently, a couple of different reasons. But again, for the most part, most students coming out of high school, there won't be any unusual circumstances. And the college plan is just if they're planning on attending full-time, part-time. So again, unusual circumstances says, if the student does have an unusual circumstance, schools will be able to collect data, or need to collect data from the student to confirm the accuracy of that. In the past, if a student put that information down, the FAFSA will get put on hold until the student confirms that. That's been changed. The FAFSA will now be processed provisionally until the student does their confirmation process. So if you're working with the student in one of these unusual circumstances, to be prepared to have some documentation ready to go. And when it speaks of a student being under legal guardianship, obviously we're all legal guardians of our own children, but that term for this purpose means court-appointed legal guardianship, which is different from custody. So it's going to ask the student to confirm the parent's email address. So when you set up your FSA ID, you have to use your email address. This is going to have the student enter that at this point. So at the end, when they're finalized, it'll get that invitation to the parent ready to go. So what is it looking for? It's looking for the student's demographic information. Again, this is fed from the FSA ID. Their citizenship status. The FAFSA can be filed by any U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen permanent resident in certain cases of asylum. If the student doesn't meet that criteria, they're not able to file the FAFSA. For statistic purposes, and they need to know, they ask the question of the parent's education status, whether the parent graduated high school, college, etc. There's a big push in the higher education to work with first-generation college students, and this is how the data is going to be collected. It's also going to ask about if the parent was unfortunately killed in the line of duty. This is due to a federal grant and some state grants that may be available if that is the case. And it's going to ask what high school the student attended. And you can start typing the name in on the high school, usually it'll pop up. Type the first couple letters and do the search, and it's easy enough to find. So all the tax information we brought in from the IRS, and it's going to ask about asset information, which I'll touch on in a moment when I get to the parent section. Then this is kind of new this year in a way. In the past, the FAFSA students can list up to 10 colleges on the FAFSA. That has now been expanded to 20 colleges. So when I started working in financial aid many decades ago, the FAFSA had 6 colleges. That's all a student could list. And they expanded it to 10. It was a big deal. And as many of you know, children are applying to many more than 10 colleges these days. So you can now have up to 20. If your child's applying to more than 20 colleges, what you're going to have to do, once your first FAFSA is processed, submitted, you get confirmation it's been processed, you have to go back in, remove some colleges, and put the new ones on, and do the whole process again. You don't have to do the whole FAFSA again, but you have to get to the college, this part, and change the colleges out. So expanding it to 20 should solve the problem for most families, but again, we still know of many students going well beyond the 20 colleges. I was lucky my daughter only applied to 8. So when that's all done, an invitation will be sent to the parent to complete their portion of the FAFSA. Step back a second, you can actually start the FAFSA and then have the invitation sent to the student. That's something that's new this year as well. So again, what does it collect from the parent? Information, same as the student, you confirm your identity when you log in with your FSA ID. You do have to log in separate. So the student completes their portion, you now have to log in, where in the past you were able to just keep going and sign at the end. You actually have to log in before anything's done. You give the consent to have your tax information transferred, and then it's going to ask about your marital status and state of legal residence. So marital status, if the parents are still married and together, then it's put married. If the parents are separated, whichever parent's information is going on the FAFSA, which is going to be called a contributor, it's a new term, if that contributor is remarried, there we go. I won't touch anything, right? Hey, I didn't plug in. Give it a second. There we go. Okay. I think the wire came a little loose. If the parent is remarried, the spouse's information is also needed. Even if they have no financial responsibility for that child, the FAFSA is looking for the household financial information for that parent and student. Again, state of legal residence, obviously New York. So, what information is needed from the parent? But it's different from the student. It's going to ask whether you received any federal means tested benefits such as WIC, SNAP, housing benefits from the federal government. They don't ask how much you received. It's a yes or no question if you received them over the past 2 years. It'll verify your tax filing status. Again, that gets brought in from the return. As far as family size, what it's going to ask for family size is it's going to populate with the number of dependents from your tax return. Now that could be different. You may have more people in your household, which I'll get to in a moment. There's a slide for that. You're going to pull the information in from the tax return. The only thing you may need to enter, if you took a withdrawal from your IRA or retirement fund that was not taxable, but it was a rollover, it doesn't pick up the rollover amount. So it'll look like you took a tax-free withdrawal, which they count as income, and it penalizes you in a great way. You just have to enter the amount of that withdrawal that was actually rolled over into another account. And then other parent information, if there's a second parent, like I said, if it's a remarried situation. Now, when it talks about assets, I don't think that's the next slide. Nope, okay. So it talks about assets. What is an asset? And this information that I have, when you do the SAI index, it'll ask about assets. You click on the little thing, and this is pretty much what I'm reading from. It's money that you have in cash, savings, and checking, money on hand. Any money from real estate other than your home. So the home you live in is not reported, the value of that is not reported on the FAFSA. We see a mistake a lot of times. Also an asset is any stocks, bonds, or certificates, any UGMA or UTMA accounts that are held by the student, not by the parent. The student is the recipient, but they're not the holder of one of those accounts. It is not reported as an asset. What's also reported as an asset for the student is the value of their 529 plan. In the past, you used to ask for the value of the 529 plans for all the children in your household. That has changed. It is now only for the student that the FAFSA is being filled out for, and only if it's held within your household. So if an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent has a 529, you do not report that on the FAFSA. So it only goes on the FAFSA under the parent section. And stresses do not include the value of the home you live in, the value of life insurance policies, or the value of your 401k or retirement plan. That is not considered an asset for the FAFSA. That's for your retirement. It's not for your child's education. What's new this year is if you're a small business owner, in the past you didn't have to report that information, now you do. It's going to ask you the value of your business. And again, how do you necessarily determine the value of your business? So the guidance that they're giving is, it's the business or an investment farm, if you have an investment farm, it's the market value of the land, buildings, machinery, and equipment or inventory, minus any debt you have on that inventory, equipment, etc. So that anything you've used for collateral, a loan that you used your business equipment for collateral, you subtract that loan from the value that's determined. If you just took out a personal loan to keep your business running, that's not necessarily considered a business debt. That's a personal loan. So again, these are pop-up questions. When you get to the FAFSA, when that question comes up, you'll click on it, it'll give you this explanation. So again, that's new this year, where you didn't have to count the value of the business of the farm, but now you do. Okay, all the information's entered, you review everything that's there, it's signed, you confirm your FSA ID, and it gets submitted to the federal government. Now, things that are a little different, that, just as you go through. If the student's independent, they would count their spouse. If they're married, they count their spouse information. The consent to transfer the federal tax information. Again, this is something that's now mandatory. If it's not done, the FAFSA will not get processed. And again, the students can start the process first, which is the traditional way. But if you as a parent want to go in and start it, by all means you can, as long as you know your students, the social security number, etc. Now, who's included in family size? We say it's going to pull the information directly from the tax return. So if your tax return has 3 dependents, that's great. But your parent may be living with you, your sibling, you may have a niece or a nephew or a family friend that you're taking care of, that you provide at least half their support for, or will be providing half their support for while your child's in college. You can add them to that FAFSA. So that field, although it populates automatically, it's one of the fields that you can actually edit. So again, it's people that you're going to be providing support for while your child's in college. And for independent students, it's the same basic thing. So, the submission summary will give you the 4 sections: the overview, the answers, the school information that's going to be sent to, the next step. If you want to print it out, you can. Again, some people save it onto their computer, some like printing it out, whatever works best for you. Now, the FAFSA gives information that's pretty straightforward. It's from your tax return, it's from your household. It doesn't necessarily explain things that could be going on in your life right now. Your child's starting college in fall 2024. If there's any parents of underclassmen in here in future years. But the FAFSA gets filed in the senior year. So you're just looking at tax information from 2022. So that's 2 years prior from when your child's actually starting college. Things could change. So schools can make some necessary adjustments. We have to allow you to submit a request for a special circumstance review. Now, this is different from unusual circumstance. Unusual is strictly based on the student's status as an independent or dependent student. Special circumstances is more the financial status of the family. Students should contact the school or the parent, submit a simple letter of explanation. Do not send us 400 pages of documentation. Because each school will say from the letter, yes, we can pursue this further, and here's what you need to do. And the school could have the same information and say, sorry, I feel bad what you're going through, but we're not going to pursue this. And they have their right to do that. They don't have to follow through. The only thing the schools are required to do is allow you to provide us information for a special circumstance review. The decisions are on a school basis. It's not on a federal basis. So what are the common special circumstances that we see? Kind of going to work backwards a little bit. The FAFSA used to ask how many people in the household are in college. If you're currently have students that are in college and going to have a second one. The benefit that was there in the past is going away. Some schools are going to be working to help you avoid some of those issues that you might have been able, the benefit that you're losing, they're going to try helping you possibly get something in exchange for it. So they may be asking you information about additional family members in college. If you pay a secondary or even a primary school tuition, obviously your student's in a public high school, but you may have other children that are in a private school. Some schools will actually say, send us a copy of the bill, we'll make the adjustments taking that into account. One of the colleges I worked for over the years said, we don't do that. Sending your child to a private school is your decision. You could send them to public school, you're paying that, that's a choice, it's not a necessity. If you have extraordinary dependent care or uncovered medical expenses, if this is the case, explain it in the letter, documentation is going to be needed. And a lot of times the documentation is a lot of back and forth, and a lot of documents are needed. I had a case I was working on just last year where the mom said we have outstanding medical bills, and I didn't doubt her. So I got all the information from her initially, and she just started sending me explanations of benefits. I'm like, okay, I see what the charges are, it says this is what you owe, but she never sent me proof that she paid anything. So I can't do anything without proof that there was an true out-of-pocket expense. We've all gotten those EOB statements from our insurance companies that says you owe almost the whole bill, and 2 weeks later you get the corrected one that says you owe a copayment. So explanation of benefits is not good. You need to see the actual payments to the medical facility. Same if you have extraordinary dependent care or even extraordinary parent care. If you have a parent who may be in an assisted living facility for some reason and you're paying for it, some schools will take that into consideration. Now, the death of a parent is obviously something all schools are going to make adjustments for across the board in an unfortunate situation. And the biggest one we all see is loss or reduction in employment or income. Again, we're using data that's 2 years old. Again, if that's your situation, send a letter explaining where you're at now as far as your employment situation. Are you currently not working at all? Are you working but making less money? And that'll determine what the school's going to ask of you. Some schools will say, okay, you're working less now. You're working, we're not going to do anything because it's going to be reflected in your next FAFSA. Some schools will ask you for proof. If you're not working at all, ask for proof of unemployment, letters of separation from your employer, just to find out, okay, you may not be working, but they may have paid you 2 years worth of severance, so you still have income. So you kind of will have to look at the whole picture. Now, the special circumstance that's the most challenging for schools isn't necessarily divorce per se, because that's a legal document. It's more separation without divorce, where in 2022 you filed taxes as married filing jointly, but now you're no longer with that person. You need to provide proof. What proof is that? Proof of separate residence. Have proof of both paychecks, both parents, one going to one address, one going to another address. And each school is going to look at different things. I had a parent a few years back, they tried, some parents tried doing things unethically, go figure, and they said, we're separated. So we going through all the stuff, and nothing was adding up right. We kept asking for more documentation. Finally, the father submitted documentation of where he's living. It was the exact same address of his place of business, which was the vineyard he owned in California. Okay? So they weren't separated. To the child on the application, everything, never put anything about separation. So again, they were trying to, get things over on us, but we've seen too much of that situation. Hopefully none of these special circumstances fit you, but let you know, if it does, at any given time during your college is in school, just send a letter to the school explaining the situation, and we're willing to work with you on that. So as I mentioned, New York State aid. As residents of New York State, both the student and parent have to be at least a 1-year resident to qualify for New York State aid. The student must attend a school within New York, either private or public, and each of their programs has their own criteria. So the biggest program in New York State is TAP. It's been around when I was in college back in the 80s, I got a TAP award. It's for undergraduate students, whether you're going part-time, full-time, community college, public college, private college, doesn't make a difference. This one actually has a magic number tied to it. If your New York State net taxable income is $80,000 a year or less, which is about $100,000 federal adjusted gross income, your child can qualify for a New York State TAP award. The minimum award is $500, the maximum is the $5,665. Over the 30-some odd years, that figure has not gone up all that much. Now, the other big program in New York State is the Excelsior Scholarship. This is the one that came out a few years ago, big hype over it. It's for students whose families earn less than $125,000 federal adjusted gross income. In 2022, they can attend a CUNY or SUNY school for free, tuition free, excuse me. So State University, City University of New York schools, tuition free, can be used for an associate's or bachelor's degree. Catch on this is, first, it only covers tuition, so fees, housing, food, you still have to pay for that. The two last bullet points. Students must meet a minimum criteria of 30 credits per academic year. So they may get it their first year, but if they only complete 28 credits, the next year, if you meet the financial requirements, your child's not going to get it because they didn't complete 30 credits. So it may mean, if they're not taking enough credits in the fall and spring, they're going to have to go in summer to catch up, and there'll probably be a delay in New York State getting that aid moving forward. Yes?
If they take college classes in high school, they can apply it towards...
That I'm not sure about. You'd have to check with the college at that point. Again, I'm not all that familiar with the state program. Yeah, I double check with that. I believe they do count it, but I don't want to speak definitively. The other caveat that I throw in here is the post-residency and employment requirements. So for each year your child receives the Excelsior Scholarship, they have to live and work in New York State upon graduating. So they get it for all 4 years. They're coming back home to live with you for 4 more years because they have to work and live in New York State. They can find an apartment, of course, but it's much cheaper moving back home. So again, we live in an area where if you go to college anywhere around here, Connecticut's right there, Jersey's nearby, upstate, Vermont, whatever it might be, they may get a good job there, but if they take that job, they're going to have to pay this back. It's an interest-free loan, so that's one thing that's a little beneficial. So they do have, I think, depending on how much they get, up to 10 years to pay it back, but it's interest-free. But they would have to pay it back. So they have to live and work in New York State during that time. Now, for private colleges and universities in New York, there's something called the Enhanced Tuition Award. So when Excelsior came out, this came out also. It's the same requirements on the front end and back end. The big difference here is schools opt into this program. And when this program came out, schools are a little hesitant. So only about 35% of the private colleges and universities in New York jumped on board. That number's down below 20%. Because it came to figure that the maximum award of $6,000 is not on top of your TAP award. It's a total New York State aid. So if a student received $3,000 in TAP, they're only going to get an extra $3,000. And half of that's being paid by the school, the other half's being paid by New York State. And when schools saw the administrative overhead to administer for this program, it was just easier for a lot of schools to say, you know what, we'll just give you the full $3,000 instead of having to deal with New York State. I currently have a student, because we did participate, we did back out of it. I have a student from 2021, we have not gotten paid yet from New York State. We're still battling. So again, administratively, it's been a hassle, so a lot of schools have backed out of it. But if your child is attending a school in New York State and you meet the income requirement, by all means, ask about it. Now, the final New York State award program, there's others besides this, especially if you're a veteran, if you're a disabled public officer, there's benefits for that as well. But the one that has no financial bearing is the New York State STEM Incentive Program. Has all the other requirements of the other two as well, as far as working and living in New York State. But this is strictly academic. If the child goes into one of the STEM majors and is in the top 10% of the class, I don't know if you rank here. If you don't rank, they have other calculations that they use to determine the eligibility. But it's strictly based on academics, being in one of those majors. So for that part, a lot of families say, I make more than 125, I'm not going to get any state aid. You might if your child's going to fit this requirement. So make sure you fill out the TAP application, or the New York State aid application, as it's called now, as well as the additional STEM application.
I have a question.
Yes.
It says full tuition.
Yes.
So that's not the fees, that's not
Correct.
anything else, that's just
Yep, STEM, like all of the state awards, is just tuition. So fees, housing, food is all on you, STEM. Now, I mentioned before something called the CSS profile. This is a form that's administered through the College Board. It is actually up and available to apply for right now. It asks for more detailed information than the FAFSA. It's used at primarily more the selective schools for admissions. in the country. It's not specific, goes all over the country. It'll collect information about the home you live in, about the cars you drive, but it'll also ask you about your debt and other, full life pictures of incomes and asset and expenses. If you're separated and you're filing FAFSA, the CSS profile may also ask for the other parent's financial information as well. So a lot of these schools use this information to spend their own money. So outside of the traditional merit scholarships, they may have other funds they use for this. Some schools even use it for their merit scholarships. I hate to say it, some schools may use it to determine whether or not your child is going to get into their school. So they either want to see that you can afford to pay, or they want to see, okay, you're going to be part of the 5% we're going to give full tuition to because you don't have any money. So the profile is used both ways. There is a fee of $25 to file the form. If more than one school is needed, it's an additional $16. When you put your financial information in, if you meet certain criteria, that fee will automatically be waived. In the past, it used to be tied into the free lunch program. It's no longer tied into that. They use their own calculations when you put your tax information in. You're going to have to data enter all your own information. And again, it's your 2022 tax information, so the taxes you would have just filed this past April. So you need to have those on hand. Strict deadlines as well. When you log on to the CSS profile section of the College Board, there's different things you can choose. One of them is to look at the participating institutions. This is just a snapshot of the partial first page. And you can see there's different columns. You can sort by state, by alphabetical, whatever it might be. Some schools require, as an example, locally, like Marist is on this list, but only for international students, not for domestic students. So don't get panicked if you see a school that, oh, I'm surprised that school's on there. They may only need it for a certain population of students. And there's a column for non-custodial parents. Some schools require it, some schools do not. So again, play around with the profile website to see it's there. I've never worked at a school that required the profile. So I've been doing this for a long time, but none of the schools I've worked for, we haven't been highly selective schools. And usually, this area, a lot of what we call the Jesuit institutions, the Fordhams, I think Fairfields, et cetera, Sacred Hearts, they all require this form. So everything's in. You got all the forms in, what's next? Schools listed on the FAFSA will get the copy of it electronically. If you got the profile, they'll get the information as well. If you did the New York State TAP application, New York State Aid application, schools may not be aware if that's completed. New York State will only give you an estimate of, schools will only give you an estimate of the New York State aid because they have to wait for the budget to pass in April. And everything will come out to you on an award notice. So take a step back. You also may be selected for a process called federal verification. What that is, the government will randomly select you to submit some of your tax information or particular forms to the school to certify that the information on the FAFSA is accurate. Now, using the new DDX, you're probably not going to be sending tax information, but if you did have that rollover information, that may need to be provided. One of the forms of verification is for the student to prove their identity. So they'll have to send in a copy of their driver's license, or actually bring in person, a copy of their driver's license, passport, whatever it might be. Most schools will accept a copy initially, but once the child is on campus, they need to bring it in person. So again, that's a random selection. So on the financial aid award notice, what's going to be on there? It's going to be the amount of federal aid you're receiving, so if you're getting a Pell Grant, SEOG, loans, etc. Estimate of state aid, like I said, New York State aid will be an estimate. As New York State residents, know any aid you get in New York does not cross state lines. I'm not aware of any state that will award a state grant for anyone outside of New York. If your child goes to another state, you're probably not going to get a state grant from them. The only one that comes into New York is Vermont, by the way. They only want to give their students $500 across state lines. It'll give you the breakdown of the merit awards, grants, etc., and the breakdown of costs, the direct expense versus the indirect expense. The award notice should be broken out into gift aid versus non-gift aid. The only thing that will not appear on the award letter initially is the additional scholarships that are not merit-based. So if your child may be getting a talent-based award, I just got an email from our theater program today saying auditions aren't happening until January. So if they're going to be giving any money out, it's probably going to be after we've possibly determined their academic scholarship. Same with athletics. I know yesterday was the big day for National Letter of Intent signing. Not everybody got that letter. Some students are still being recruited, especially if they're football players, because that doesn't happen until February. So the initial financial aid won't include that. So that extra talent-based awards may not be on the initial award notice, but everything else should be there. All right, so I got done in a little less than an hour, so plenty of time for question and answers. Hopefully answers, definitely questions. Yes.
For the Excelsior Scholarship, you have to fill out the TAP and the Pell first. And then
Right.
the Excelsior is just what didn't get covered in the TAP.
Right, for the Excelsior Scholarship, the FAFSA has to be filled out, the New York State aid application, which used to be called the TAP application. From what I'm being told from New York State, you don't need a separate application at that point for Excelsior. They will notify you if you're eligible for it based on the TAP application, and if they need additional information, they'll ask at that time. Yes, sir.
So I'm just confused on the dates for the FAFSA, because
Sure.
I know you said it's October, but it's not ready till December.
Yep, so this year for the FAFSA, it's not yet out.
It's not-
FAFSA
so
for
there's nothing to do
2024,
right now.
25, you cannot do.
And I have a son that's already in college, I can't redo his yet either.
Exactly, so
Okay.
the only one, if you go to the FAFSA website, the only FAFSA you can file right now is for the 2023-24 academic year, which is the one we're currently in. The one for next year, for 24-25, December. What date? Yeah, we're starting an office pool to get the actual date to figure out when it's gonna be. Yeah.
So going back to the assets, if you're on as a joint owner, like a parent's account, like I'm on my mother's account, just so that I can help keep track of her expenses, but I'm not, quote, the tax owner of the account, do I have to claim that as an asset?
No, because you're not the primary holder of the account. You're kind of, some people may say, yes, your name's on it, it's a joint account. The way I look at that is, it's your mother's account that you're just kind of managing. You're the account manager more than a joint account holder. Sure.
Just a clarifying question, sorry for my laryngitis. Can we get our ID now, or do we have to wait till December?
Great question. The FSA ID, nothing better to do tonight, the long weekend, go home and create your FSA ID. You definitely want to do it now, because if you do it at the same time you file the FAFSA, you're not going to be able to file the FAFSA. It takes the government up to 72 hours, I think they said, to verify the information on the FSA ID with Social Security Administration. So usually, actually, it probably takes less than 24 hours, but they say give them 72. So if you don't have an FSA ID, go home, create one as soon as possible, have your student do so as well. And again, it's good for as long as, I think it takes 20 years, if not longer. But again, those parents who have an FSA ID, go in, make sure you know your password. If not, reset it and save it, obviously. Yes?
So you can use, so I have a kid in college, right, so I can still use the same FAFSA ID for my students?
Correct. The FSA ID for the parent is good for all students, but each student needs their own. So you only need one FSA ID, and it's good for all your students. And if you decide to go back to college, it's good for you as well. Yes?
So you mentioned with the 529 plan,
Yeah.
so if the parents are divorced and the child has money under both parents, but only the custodial parent is filing the FAFSA, then they don't need to know about the 529 that the other parent holds?
That's kind of one of the exceptions. Being the 529 is for that student, it still gets reported as a parental asset. It's a parental asset, not a student asset, but being it's for the student that's going to college, it does get counted because it's held within, for lack of a better word, the biological family, the immediate family. Outside of the household, meaning grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, that's different. But being it's held by a parent, a student parent, it does get reported, but just that student's information. There's multiple 529s, it's only for the student attending college. Yes?
If you're applying to the Excelsior Scholarship, does the 529 count towards income?
The New York State application, I don't know if they ask the 529. They don't look at assets as heavily as the federal government does traditionally. They pretty much ask for information off of your New York State, was it IT 100? I forgot the form name is, but the New York State tax form. Yes?
Yes, so you mentioned how medical bills, that's something that the New York State looks at so they can help you out financially. If a parent is also paying another child's debt from school, do they also look at that?
Most schools don't look at educational debt as a special circumstance, because they look at it as a parental obligation, for lack of a better word. And the medical expenses, each school looks at that on a case-by-case basis, but educational debt is usually not looked at. The CSS profile does ask about educational debt, so that's something the profile would look at, but not the FAFSA. And most schools usually, I can't say all schools, but most schools usually do not consider that a special circumstance.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
If I'm gonna, pass on my, post 9/11 GI Bill to my child, is there also some of the Excels or some of these other benefits or scholarships can be used in conjunction with, or is there rules about that?
Great questions. Regarding the use of post 9/11 GI Bill being passed along to a dependent child. If it's a full 100%, it'll cover full tuition. So if that's not 100%, then each school handles it differently. The way I've handled it at my school, and I work with other schools in the New York State, where whatever they get from the Veterans Administration, the child will still be eligible anything else from the school as long as it doesn't exceed tuition. New York State also has a program for parents who are veterans and students who are veterans, so you can check with them in conjunction with the federal GI Bill. So it's, again, and New York State's expanding their program where it could cover up to the cost of a SUNY tuition. So if your child goes to a private school within New York State, they won't get the full amount, but they can get up to a New York State tuition amount for that school. So again, it's some research, as long as you have all your papers in hand from the VA, and it's gotten better, they streamlined it, it's been better over the last few years, but it's been expanding. The state does get involved as well. One thing to throw out there with New York State also, hopefully it doesn't affect anyone in the room, but if there is any parents where a child is a survivor or a parent who was either killed or disabled during the World Trade Center, they have a scholarship for that as well. That covers full tuition for New York State or CUNY and partial for private colleges and education. So New York State World Trade Center scholarship. Yes.
So you mentioned how there are scholarships for victims of 9/11. Is there anything in particular for COVID-19?
Nothing as of yet. Most of the scholarships that are out there from the state, scholarships from the state, it's 9/11, military, and killed in the line of duty, whether it's military, police, fire, it's at emergency services. But nothing as of yet for no direct COVID scholarships. There could be some out there that I'm not aware of, but they'd be more the outside resources.
And nothing for first responders?
Not directly. Some schools do. Actually, I saw a local college. I live in Rockland County, and one of the colleges over there, if you belong to the fire department in that community, they give you a tuition discount. So some schools may have some sort of first responder discounts. So by all means ask. It's something more school-based. It's not actually state or federal-based. New York State, I know they had looked into it over the years, but I don't think they ever got any money for it at this point. But they have been working on it. I know that for sure.
Thank you.
I have another
Yes.
question. So you mentioned on the FAFSA, they don't look at your retirement funds that you have for the parent, but on the CSS profile they do?
Very most likely, I can't say for sure, but I believe they look at all available income and assets, not just, the way the federal government looks at it, your retirement fund is geared to your retirement. You shouldn't be touching it. CSS profile, they look at things a little deeper where there could be other funds available. You may not be able to get the full amount of it, but you may be able to access some of it. So I don't want to speak 100% for the profile, because I've never completed it, but they do ask more detailed information about both income, assets, and debt as well.
So would the best resource for me for, like my daughter's applying to a couple schools that require it, is to ask the financial aid office of that particular school?
Most definitely, and if not, reach out to the college board directly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I know you mentioned before, I just missed it. So I have a FAFSA for my son during college. I'm going to create a new FAFSA ID for my daughter. How do I link her to me?
It's kind of when she puts her information in to the FAFSA, she'll put your email address.
Okay.
And that'll send you the invitation to complete your section.
Got it.
Or if you log in first, you put in her email address, which will link to her FSA ID.
Perfect, thank you.
We think, again, it's the new process this year, so hopefully it works. This is what they're telling us. Again, we're dealing with the federal government, so take that for what it's worth. But this has been going on for a long time. It's delayed, which, the only perk of the delay, and I'm joking with a lot of families and students, is by the time it's ready to to be filed, your child's probably not going to be in school that week or that period of time. So it's a good bonding moment, parent-child bonding, to sit down and file the FAFSA together. Which we know the student will sit down and say, okay, I did my part, see it. Yes.
I'm sorry, what work day? I was just reading here, and over here it says, apply early, check with each school for deadlines.
Yes.
So obviously, they know that, we can't do it.
Correct, so that's it. Some schools have updated, so we've updated ours to February 15th. Some schools will maybe posting, deadline will be posted once we know the FAFSA is available. Schools, and they're gonna rush to get things done, especially schools that are competing against each other, the smaller schools, like, where I am at Pace, we're competing for students, and the May 1st deadline's not changing. You still have to make your decision on May 1st. That hasn't changed, so it's given us a much smaller window to get the things processed. So financial aid is gonna be stressed once the FAFSA comes out. It's gonna be more difficult reaching us. I imagine that's at every school, just because of limited resources and the amount of time that we have. Yes?
Now, I have twins, so is that considered a special circumstance? Like, let's say they apply to like a school and they both go to the same school. Do you know if certain schools give that?
It's not a special circumstance. It used to be addressed in the FAFSA as two in college. That doesn't get addressed any longer. It's in the household it's addressed. There could be outside scholarships for twins. Definitely, that's something you want to definitely research.
Okay.
More so, especially if there's any organizations for twins. Check to find out. Maybe to join an organization to get a scholarship, please do that. Some schools maybe have endowment funds, for twins, especially if they both attend school.
Yeah. Some
Some schools will give sibling discounts. They may not give it to both students, they may give it to one, because the first one doesn't get it, but the second one does. But not all schools do that. Same with legacy awards. If your child goes to the same college a parent graduated from, they may give a little bit extra for that. Those are the little things that could come up along the way. But definitely mention in any appeals or special circumstance. You could probably get a special circumstance with the school, because again, it may not be a special circumstance, but again, you may find out they have something for twins that you didn't know about. Or triplets or quads if there's anyone in the room. I only have one son, I don't have one else does. Yes, sir.
So you stated that under Excelsior it was about $125,000 per year as the total income.
Correct.
Has the New York State ever made an exception for anybody who's gone over 55%?
Not that I'm aware of, because again, the TAP, they don't use 80,000, and when they extended this award, they wanted to make sure that they captured more people, so they extended it to the 125. They haven't mentioned any word that I've heard of when I was at the conference in New York State last month, and there's no talk of expanding that beyond the 125 at this point. There's many people in New York State government that want to get rid of it altogether, more so than expanding it. Yes?
When do you usually hear back in terms of the letter? What's that time frame?
Response time usually, again, on a normal circumstance, when the FAFSA was available in October, if you did early action, early decision, you had a financial aid package at the same time. If you did regular decision, depending on when the student got admitted to the school, you won't hear back from financial aid until admissions does their part and says, yes, you've been admitted to our school. Usually, if the FAFSA is in at that point in time, usually it's within 2 weeks of that. The state and CUNY schools traditionally have been later. So even if your child got admitted to a SUNY or CUNY school by December, on a good year, you still may not hear until February. That's just how they've operated over the years. Not all of them, but most of them. But for the most part, if the FAFSA is not going to be ready by December, schools won't be able to do their processing until probably the earliest, the beginning of February. Schools that use the CSS profile may get information out sooner, because they won't get you Pell information, but they can get some other information because they'll use their own calculation from the profile. But for Pell and loans, you have to wait for the FAFSA. So from the time the FAFSA becomes available, give schools a minimum 6 to 8 weeks. So they're going to be rushing to get it done. Yes?
So working at the school, you stated that could also help with financial aid. How much of the tuition does that pay for?
Good question. Federal work study actually doesn't help pay for tuition. In most cases, it's more of covering those indirect expenses, the transportation, books, supplies, etc. Or as I like to say, it avoids the calls home to the parents saying, I need money, because you're working and you're earning your own paycheck, like any other college employee. You're not going to get paid a lot. It's minimum wage, most jobs, unless you have, you're a tutor, lifeguard, something like that, then that might pay a little more. But most of on-campus employments, minimum wage jobs, it works around your academic schedule, which is beneficial because come finals time and midterm time, they know that you're a student first, you're not an employee first. So you're able to take time off, you're not getting paid, but you don't have to feel the stress of, I have to get to work. no, you have to be in the library studying, or, you know, in a study group, whatever it might be. So that's the other benefit of the work-study program, plus getting the experience.
And that still also falls under the whole, the TEACH program or TAP program, where you could teach a class and you get paid to go to school.
That each school handles that differently. That's each school to school, how they administer any of their working conditions. Each school handles it a little differently. Most students coming in, you know, they're doing general office work type of employment.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, not bad. So if other questions come up along the way, you know, reach out to, you and we'll get in touch with me, you know, put you in contact. So good luck, that's the best I can say. Keep an eye out on the email. And for the students that are in the room, and for the parents, tell your students, colleges are way behind the times. We communicate via email. We don't use, you know, we'll put messages on social media, but we don't communicate really any other way. Not even texting. You know, occasionally some schools will text, but email is the way we go. And do not use your high school email. Make sure you have a separate email account. Your high school email will disappear at some point in time. So make sure you have a separate, you know, Gmail or iCloud, whatever email you choose to use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everybody. Enjoy the day.